The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Plum.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Gentleman may proceed.
Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, the suggestion this morning was that we ought to call a spade, and I couldn't be in more agreement than that, Mr. Speaker. We need to call a spade. And when we're talking about Medicaid expansion, calling it Medicaid expansion on the one hand describes it, but I would suggest to you there's probably a more accurate way to describe what we're about, and that is insuring uninsured Virginians. For as while we fiddle here, Mr. Speaker, and talk about the politics involved nationally and state by state now with Medicaid expansion and the coverage gap, the fact of the matter is there are 1 million Virginians who are uninsured. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, while we sit here today, there are Virginians who are trying to make a decision about what bill do they pay. Do they get the prescription filled? Do they get the propane tank filled, their gasoline tank, or what do they do? Because it is the case, there are 1 million Virginians uninsured. When are we going to get around to talking about the needs of Virginians and not the needs of politics involved in these decisions? It is the case that while we are here talking about what should be done with the Medicaid expansion, as we found out through floor speeches already, Virginia businesses are paying the fees that are related to Medicaid expansion. While we are talking about Medicaid expansion, Virginia businesses are paying for Medicaid expansion. The question becomes, when we think about the Virginia way, and that Virginia way being one of the best managed states in the Union, I wonder how it's going to look when we take a look at Virginia's current circumstance of where Virginians contribute to expanding Medicaid coverage, insurance coverage for uninsured individuals in states throughout the Union, but forego that money for their own citizens. Is that best managed? Is that the Virginia way? Mr. Speaker, I would suggest to you that's not the case. At some point, we do need to call a spade, and that is that there are people in Virginia who are hurting. There are people who are hurting in terms of medical insurance. There are people who are making those tough decisions about how they have to spend their personal budgets and so on. We'll continue to look around and poke at the fact that some adjustments are being made over time as we undergo a massive new program implementation. Well, let me tell you what. If adjustments weren't made, the speeches on the floor would be, well, this program is set in concrete, no adjustments are being made. We ought to, it seems to me, gain from an understanding from that there's a possibility that we could come up with a Virginia way. We could make a proposal, as other states have made proposals, and we could go to the federal government with those proposals. Instead, what we continue to seem to want to do is to argue about the issue. But we argue not about the real issue before us, that being the people in Virginia who are in need of this kind of coverage. We talk again about the politics of it. Who's going to get the credit? Who's going to get the blame? Mr. Speaker, and ladies and gentlemen of the House, Virginia, the best managed state in the Union, next to Utah, and Utah, you know, is usually the one we're competing with. We're first or second, and they're first or second each year. Utah, not hardly a hotbed of liberalism, took a look at the same set of facts that we got, and they decided to go forward to close their coverage gap, to take advantage of Medicaid funding. And I would suggest to you that if we want to keep that position of being one of the best managed states in the Union, we'd make the same kind of decision. But, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, as we go forward, what I would implore us to do is to take a look at what the subject is really about. And the subject is about Virginians. It's about Virginians in need, Virginians who are having to make impossible decisions that we can make easier for them if we, in fact, stop the stonewalling, stop rejecting all the possible compromises, stop rejecting all the alternatives, and get down to working out a solution for those Virginians who can be helped by closing the coverage gap, Medicaid expansion, the Virginia way, a spade, whatever it is you want to call it. We need to get on with resolving the problem. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.